So thank you everyone for joining. If you're able to make it, this is my first time doing a live cook with me cooking class live stream sort of thing, and it's also my first time making this recipe, so if there are any bumps along the way, we'll be in it together. The reason why I wanted to make this live stream cook with me is just because I realized that there are a lot of barriers that can get in the way of cooking for the first time or just cooking a new recipe in general. And so a couple months ago, I guess, I asked you guys to share some of your confidence building tips for building up the courage to cook. And you guys shared a lot of great tips like listening to music, so I have a little bit of music in the background. And I have my recipe out with me so I can look at it. I put all my ingredients out and all of my supplies that I need. And I have a little glass of ice water with me. One of the greatest tips you guys gave was just saying that having someone to cook with is really encouraging and makes it a lot more fun. So virtually, I guess we can cook together. So let's go ahead and get started by gathering your ingredients. One of the reasons I chose this recipe in particular is because it requires very few ingredients and very few supplies. So you should be able to make it maybe in a college dorm or in a place without an oven or a stove, that sort of thing. So for your supplies, you don't necessarily need all of these things to make the recipe, but to make it easier, you might want to get out a cutting board, a nice knife to chop vegetables, a can opener, and then a nice mixing bowl and a fork. And you might also want a measuring spoon. This one is 1 tablespoon. I think that's the only measurement we'll need for this recipe. So you could also just use a large spoon. And this recipe should only take about 10 minutes to make, but we'll see how long it takes us. So, and then for your ingredients, you're going to want some whole wheat or whole grain slices of bread, some chickpeas or garbanzo beans. If you're making 4 sandwiches, you're going to need 2 of these cans, and if you're making just 2 sandwiches, we only need 1 can. Right now, I'm just going to make 2 sandwiches, but just factor in double however much I'm making, or subtract if you're just making 1 sandwich. And then you'll also need some lemon juice. You can also have a fresh lemon, just a lemon, and squeeze that, but I just have some pre-squeezed lemon juice, a little bit of mayonnaise, and then some fresh salad greens here, if you can see the corner, and also some green onions in this bag. We need about 3 green onions to make 2 sandwiches, so we have plenty here. Move the camera just so we can see a little bit more. And then also some celery, which is the first thing we're going to be dealing with, is chopping that celery. Just 2 sandwiches. All of the recipe asked for was 1 rib of celery, which is just one of these single pieces, whereas this is an entire stalk of celery. That's something I didn't know before, that celery was referred to in that way. So I'm going to clear off my cutting board. So I'm just going to take 1 piece of celery here and break it off. Just so you know, I am not I'm just your average cook. I know the basics, but I'm definitely not a pro chef or anything. And the one thing I forgot to add, see, here we are, already some bumps, but you're going to want a strainer too, if you have one, that will help strain the chickpeas or garbanzo beans, whatever you call it. And for just basic knife cutting technique, I usually just put my knuckles out like this, and I think the smaller slices for the sandwich the better, so I'm just going to chop pretty small slices. And if your your rib of celery is a little bit wider, the recipe suggested just to cut it in half and then slice it so the bottom layer is a little bit wider. Okay, and this might be, if you really like big celery chunks, I'm not a huge fan, but if you really like big pieces, you can keep them this way. I'm gonna cut them a little bit smaller just for the base in the sandwich. And then for my 2 sandwiches, that might be enough. If you want to make more, just kind of, if you're feeling confident, just go ahead and take a little bit more celery, chop up a little bit more. But for me, this looks like it should be enough to put in 2 sandwiches. And the next thing I'm going to do is just open 1 can of garbanzo beans, and then drain it, strain it, and rinse it. I've got my can opener here. All right, so just like that, like so. And then the recipe also suggested to rinse the beans out. Just to put a little bit of water over the top. And then, this bowl I chose is way too big, but I'm going to pour the beans into the bowl and then just mix, mush, smash all of those beans as much as I can. If you want, you don't have to drain out all the liquid. You could just pour out a little bit and use some of that juice in the can to help, make the garbanzo beans or chickpeas a little bit softer. It might be a little bit easier to mix them all up. And you can also factor in if the can is already salted, we might have to add a little bit more salt since we rinsed them. This is kind of an interesting sandwich concept that I hadn't thought of, so I'm excited to try this recipe. That's the nice thing about learning as you go. I think next time I might not drain all of the liquid out of the can and save a tiny bit just to help make this process a little bit faster of packing down all of the chickpeas. But we learn as we go, which is great. If this is a fun concept that you guys like, or if you prefer just having a pre-made recipe video, but if you prefer this, feel free to leave any recipes that you would like to be made that are maybe a little bit more time intensive or a little more complicated in the comments, or just let us know. Okay, for now that should be pretty good. We'll see what it looks like when we add the other ingredients to this chickpea mix, and if we need to mush it up a little bit more, we can definitely do that. So the next instruction is to chop up the green onions. Also, we could have done this directly after chopping up the celery, but if you're making this recipe later, it's another thing to consider. Just whatever makes the most sense in terms of the order to make everything. That's what you should do, because sometimes recipes put things in a weird order and it doesn't make as much sense for you or your kitchen. So we'll get started by just rinsing those real quick. Okay. Saving water as much as we can. Pinch all these together on this one green onion stalk and make really nice little slices. Green onions are very beautiful to me. I don't know how beautiful I'm going to be able to slice these, but I love how they come out in these little perfect circles. Beautiful onions. Oh, I'm starting to cry a little bit. Classic cutting onions. Have you guys heard of those onion goggles? They're actual goggles to cut onions. I might need them. Ooh. Okay, that looks good for now. So the next thing it says is just to combine all of the green onions and celery and the chickpeas in the bowl. I'm just gonna push all that goodness in there. Tell me this isn't a beautiful vegetable. It's just so elegant, I feel like. A green onion. Okay. Getting a little sidetracked. So we've got our green onions, we've got our celery and our chickpeas all mixed up in here. We're gonna combine them all together also with the mayonnaise. we're just gonna get about 1 to 2 tablespoons. So I have a tablespoon here. You can just use a spoon as well. And most of these, I'm gonna put that in there. Most of these ingredients, you probably could mix together without like all of these tools. You could just, you know, kind of toss it together without needing a whole bunch, but it's starting to smell very good, which is great because that's awesome when recipes are pretty easy to make without a whole lot of stuff. So if you don't have pre-squeezed or whatever you would call this type of lemon juice, you can just squeeze that lemon and then add it. I'm gonna actually toss this with the mayonnaise because I'm gonna try to get up a little bit. So I'm gonna mix it all up. It said just to start with 1 tablespoon of each, but if it is still seeming pretty dry, we can add more. And I'm gonna keep kind of packing that chickpea mix down too. I'm very excited to try this recipe. It smells really good. This might become a staple. A little bit more lemon juice, just a little sprinkle. I think it's okay to eyeball stuff sometimes and just be brave with it. And a little bit more mayonnaise, just a tiny bit. Got a little strip of something in there. Beautiful. Okay, it's looking good. And I'm gonna add a little bit of salt. We're getting so close to this recipe being done. I'm gonna add a little bit of salt. The recipe said, you know, about 1/4 to 1/2 teaspoon of salt and pepper, but it's really just personal taste if you like things saltier or a little bit more peppery. Also, again, consider if you left the liquid from the can of the garbanzo beans or chickpeas, it might be a little bit saltier anyways. Okay, this is looking really good. Take either whole wheat or whole grain bread. From what I've heard, whole wheat is the more nutritious one to go for because it gets you all the good parts of the grain, but if you have whole grain or whole wheat, both are really great healthy options. And the optional ingredient was hummus. I don't know if I mentioned that earlier. You can add it just to the outside of the bread if you want your sandwich to have a little bit more, you know, wet consistency to it. I know some people don't like saying the word moist. I don't mind it, but I like a good sandwich, a lot of, you know, toppings and such. So I'm gonna add a little hummus to the outside. This has protein and all sorts of delicious veggies in it, and it looks amazing. And then I'm gonna add a little bit of fresh spring mix, just here and there. And I bet you could just make this into your mix and just store it to put on sandwiches without, you know, pre-making sandwiches. So it's really great for meal prep. I'm trying to think of other things you could put it in. You could use it as like a dip for some crackers. Okay, I'm going to put that chickpea mix. It's kind of like a tuna sandwich with chickpeas, which is really interesting. And probably very delicious. We'll see here in a second. That looks like a very filling sandwich. I don't know if you agree. I think it looks filling. I'm personally gonna add a little bit more salt to the top, just because I like things a little salty. If you know me, I'll give you my review. Doesn't that look good? I'm chewing. It's very good. Thank you so much for cooking with me today. I hope that you enjoyed making this recipe with me and that it was helpful. Let me know if you want more of these videos or if you just want straight up pre-recorded recipe videos. I'm gonna go finish this sandwich and use this to make one for probably Monday. Thanks for joining. See you next time. So thank you.